Trust you are doing well and keeping safe. We started COVID Jankari with the sole intention of providing validated information, resources, and on ground support to those in distress during the pandemic. Our state-wise communities have over 50,000 people assisting one another, backed up by 250 digital volunteers to manage them efficiently. To better organize these volumes, we are building a tech-led, crowdsourced matching platform to brace up for future waves of COVID and beyond. We have tied up with pool of doctors across India to provide teleconsultation to our communities to ensure they get timely help and avoid self-medication at all costs. While our objective is to improve accessibility for everyone, we are also looking to subsidize consultation fee for the people in need. Apart from this, we have tied up with Zomato Feeding India initiative to serve food to the street dwellers and animals during lockdown across various cities in India to support them. I'm Swati Khandelwal, founder of Exemius Health, and today I welcome you to next edition of our flagship Health Jankari series, wherein we'll host much needed panel discussion featuring prominent women journalists across India who are leading on-ground coverage of the pandemic. Our panel comprises of Ms. Tanushree Pandey. She's a journalist with India Today. She has covered COVID-19 situation from New Delhi, UP, and Haryana. Welcome, Tanushree.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
Ms. Vijayta Singh. She is journalist with The Hindu, based in Delhi. She covers home affairs and policy. Happy to have you on this panel, Vijayta.
Thank you so much.
Ms. Anusha Sood. She is journalist based out in Bangalore. She has covered COVID-19 for the Indian Express newspaper. Welcome, Anusha.
Thank you so much for having me here.
Ms. Safina Nabi. She is an independent journalist and has been writing for COVID situation in Kashmir for Al Jazeera and other publications. Glad to have you, Safina.
Thank you so much.
Ms. Soumya Lakhani is an independent journalist. She has been highlighting issues of healthcare workers through her reports. Welcome, Soumya.
Hi.
Ms. Tabina Anjum has been covering COVID pandemic from across Rajasthan. She writes for Outlook magazine. Warm welcome to you, Tabina.
Thank you so much, Swati. Thank you so much.
Thank you all for joining us. These terrific women journalists that we have today on our panel have not only covered the pandemic through their moving reporting in last 2 months, but also have been great communicator and influencer on their social media handles. So welcome all. I'm glad to have all of you for this panel discussion. I also welcome our moderators, Dr. Venuka and Dr. Hari, to host the panel. Let's talk health.
Important prevailing issues or processes which affect COVID, and your opinion on what could be stopped or started or continued with what's happening already related to these issues or processes, right? And your opinion on it. So we will start with Tanushree, yourself. Now, this is regarding our concern about vaccinating all the 18 plus population in India as soon as possible. So what do you think we should start doing from where we are?
I think this is a question, Hari, you would ask a class 2 kid, he or she will be able to tell. It's not a rocket science. You should have the intention. People on a social media platform called Twitter, and these are random people I'm talking about, no people with no contacts, no influence. They were helping each other 24/7 and they were able to save thousands of lives. So if the government want, they can easily do it. So I think very quickly, more walk-in centers. It should be a door-to-door vaccination. The government should start with the door-to-door vaccination drive. I don't have to tell this. I mean, more than half of the population doesn't have access to COVID, doesn't have access to phones. Forget COVID. So it's not working. The application, the digital format of it, it's not working. It's not hassle-free. People who are dead, they have been given certificates of getting a jab. So government needs to put a halt to all these kind of inconveniences. And I think more walk-in centers, more centers in the rural areas, and door-to-door vaccination drive, I think, would be right now. It's a right. I mean, it's people's right to get vaccinated against COVID-19, and I think we have given vaccine to some other country. Okay, very nice, very good. We are very great country, but I think we also need to take care of our own people now. At least journalists are not getting vaccinated. I thought that, okay, I won't jump the line. It's the right thing to do, but then I kept waiting, and I just kept waiting, and all the centers got over, and I wasn't vaccinated, and I was calling people every day, kahin कुछ से भी लगवा दो, कुछ भी लगवा दीजिए, आप कुछ भी लगवा दीजिए, कुछ भी वैक्सीन बोल के मुझे लगवा दो. So this was, I mean, it's really bizarre. But yes, I think more walk-in centers, that would be the answer. That more rural area should be right now, I think, the priority of the government. So a drive of door-to-door vaccination policy, I think, should be the right thing to do.
Right. Sure. Thanks for that. And also, what you're saying, it's also more like an overhaul of what's happening currently with vaccination, right? Not. Sure. All right. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Moving on to Safina. Safina, this is about ensuring the faster availability of essential drugs across the country. What do you think? Okay, this question is, what do you think we should continue doing? Or if you think the existing processor policies are not working, what do you think we should probably start doing?
I don't think so. There is anything in place that we should continue to do, because there are changes every now and then the way the things are changing, that we have to change with it. I think what I personally feel when I was reporting, and I felt a great need of particular stuff, that was there should be a central surveillance system which is transparent for the public, to see the resources available with the healthcare centers in the country, from beds to medicines, to anything, for example, ambulances and injections available. During this time, a lot of people, like, they're struggling with to get medicines or to get beds, from Kashmir to UP in North and North India, and several SOS calls were even reported from developed southern states, which we call, including Bangalore, which is known as the cyber city of India. I think there should be a surveillance system where every information should be available, and not only, at least state-wise, where we get details of beds, ventilators, medicines, availability of, oxygen supply, everything should be there. We shouldn't, people shouldn't run from Twitter to Facebook, from Facebook to Instagram, in getting all these details. This is the primary, primary work of the government, to keep all these things available. And it's not like it just happened yesterday. We are in the period of pandemic from 1.5 years now. And if nothing, at least this should have been in place.
Right, sure. Thanks, Safina. So a centralized repository and accurate information accessible for everybody. Right? Yeah, fantastic thought as well. Moving on, this is for Tabina.
Yeah.
The question is regarding the supply chain of oxygen across India. What do you think we should probably stop doing with what's happening currently with oxygen supply?
Stop doing, or we should do? I mean, we should have more, oxygen production. I mean, we should have more oxygen concentrators. There should have been, like manufacturing, more oxygen. I mean, there was always, courts had to intervene. Come on, and in our, national capital, we received those SOSs, those alarming, scary SOSs that, hospital is running short of oxygen, so many patients are on the bed, and in 2 hours there will be no oxygen. Like, we all had sleepless nights. So I mean, proper policy, because already there are news that, we will be, most probably the third wave will hit India by September. I don't know how much it's right, how much it's wrong. Scientists know, epidemiologists know better. Again, we are journalists, we are no experts. So, but now is again, earlier there were misplaced priorities, there were misplaced priorities. Election was on priority, health was not on priority, people's safety was not on priority, nothing was on priorities, fine. But now, since, the pandemic too has exposed infrastructure of India, it has actually exposed every state, every center, state, districts, rural, urban, every government was caught unaware. I mean, they were just, in middle of something, and, pandemic 2 takes place. They're not really ready. All they had were, the isolation beds, because they had made those in pandemic 1. Like Maharashtra had isolation beds, full isolation tents where, you can keep patients separately. But pandemic 2 required oxygen beds. What was required was oxygen beds, because whoever was, hospitalized, whoever was, asked to go to hospital, alone a bed wasn't, helpful. It wouldn't have done, the job. So there was no oxygen again, there were no medicines, there were no doctors, there were no beds. We have seen these visuals, and we have seen with our eyes that, patients were made to sit on footpath, patients were made to sit on chair, and, they were given oxygen supplies.
Right.
So, I mean, these visuals scare us, these realities scare us. So if we can't learn now, then never. And we are journalists, we have really done a lot of work. We have done work in highlighting everything. Photojournalists have taken pictures, video journalists have come with, heart-wrenching videos with visuals, and we have reported a lot. So now is the time that government administration takes cognizance. They take some lessons, they take cognizance, they work on it. Now it's their part. And for us as journalists to keep this issue alive, we should now concentrate on, how many children ICUs are already, ready. Because if there is third wave and it's going to hit youngsters below 18, children. So again, we need, infrastructure. Again, we need hospitals. Again, we need hospitals. That primary health center should be well equipped,
Right.
The CMO should be well equipped, chief medical officers, the thing CMHO. So it should be well equipped. The CHCs, the PHCs, the city hospitals, the district hospitals, it starts from there. Otherwise, सारा रश आपके जो state का hospital है, city का hospital, capital है, उस पे आ जाता है. तो हम क्या सीख रहे हैं? मतलब फिर से जो हमारा जो फंड है, जो एलोकेशन ऑफ फंड हुआ है अभी जो बजट में सब जगह, स्टेट में, सेंटर में, डाइवर्ट इट अ लिटिल, है ना, कुछ भी करिए इधर उधर. ऑलरेडी many states are doing global tendering thing, for vaccinations. Rajasthan is one of those 11 states who have written, and now we are getting vaccines here, but they will be the double the cost जो center दे रहा था. So again, it's a burden on state. So I mean, for next few months, whole focus should be on, healthcare system. It should be on healthcare system. It should be on children's healthcare now, because, agar third wave such mein aa raha hai September mein, so are we well equipped? I really don't know. How equipped are we? And what else is needed? Just say is bar oxygen was needed, medicines were needed, remdesivir or blah, blah. So aage kya hai? So I think a proper, it should happen, and it should happen everywhere. It should happen in center, it should happen in every state, because a wave aega, it's a equalizer. It will happen everywhere, it will happen in every state. So that's what we have learned from this wave, second wave. Thank you, Hari.
Right. Absolutely. Thanks, Dr. Tabina. You're right. So if the focus should not only be on oxygen, as you're saying, we don't know what's going to come up with the third wave. We need to prepare for that as well. Yeah. Next on to Anusha. Anusha, this is kind of building up on what Tanushree has told earlier regarding vaccination, right? About opening more walk-in centers and essentially more centers across that people can access. Now, there's also certain hesitancy, as we discussed in the previous part, right? So what do you think we should start to build the awareness about the vaccination?
In my personal opinion, I think it is too late now to begin afresh. So I would think it is more resourceful to use the infrastructure that we have already. In Kannada, there's a very well-known idiom. It says, "Ur kolle hodmele ur bagal hakadru anta." So now is not the time to worry about what should we do to begin awareness on vaccination, at least inoculation drive. I personally believe pick up one place where the most vulnerable people will have to go, if not on a daily basis, at least once a week. I look at it as, say, PDS shops. who are the people who have vaccine hesitancy? It's not the urban folk who are standing in queues or, logging on to CoWIN to get a vaccination. It's the folk who do not either have access to such internet, who do not want to go get vaccinations out of fear, out of, myths or belief or whatever kind of superstition. There are also folks who think it's going to be expensive. They do not know it is free. They do not know that the government is there to cover the cost for them. So to create awareness, pick out one spot where these people will go to. Your house helps, your drivers, your auto drivers in rural parts of the country, farmers, dairy farmers, farm helps, farm laborers, they all go to your already set PDS shops. So use that to create awareness. For example, in Karnataka, there are 600 gram panchayats, and we have some 20,010 PDS shops. Use them to create awareness, use them as makeshift vaccination centers. According to me, building on what we have right now is the way forward, because it's too late to build afresh right now. Also, we are a country that likes being rewarded for everything. We like a pat on the back, we like appreciation. So if you want to mass vaccinate people in a short period of time, please incentivize. I know it sounds ridiculous. You can always tell me, why should I pay you for saving your life? Because people do not know that the vaccine is going to save their life. It's as simple as that. Break it down instead of making it into
Anushka, we're kind of losing you.
COVID, you'll have to
Anusha, your
fight
voice is
against
cracking.
this virus. Just break it incentive. It doesn't even have to be monetary. Give them. I should repeat a point. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Am I audible better now?
Yes.
No, not yet.
Yeah, it's better.
Right, so I don't know. Okay, then I will just repeat my last sentence. So we are a country that likes a pat on the back. So I think incentivizing.
Yeah. Anusha, I think your internet is a little patchy.
I think let me just continue what she's saying.
Ensuring that we reach our vaccination target. I don't know if I'm repeating myself, but
yes, Anusha, we got that. So you're saying we should incentivize vaccination to promote adoption.
That's correct.
Yeah?
So it doesn't even have to be financial. I'm
Yeah.
saying if you're going to anyway start a vaccination center or an awareness center in the PDS system, just give 2 kilos of rice or 2 kilos of sugar, you're done. People will come. People
Sure.
will take those vaccinations.
Sure. Great thought. Great thought.
Hari, I would quickly like to add something because I'll just miss out on this. Incentivize what Anusha said, I really agree. And so should be the ANMs, Asha Sayoginis that have been doing a lot of work. They haven't been really paid well for this vaccination thing. They're the real ones who are going from door to door, who are doing screening. All of us have done stories. Like I've done stories. I know so many people here in the panel must have done at least stories or must have told their reporters to do stories. I mean, they were paid 1,000 rupees last year for 4 months, 1, 2, 3, 4 to be precise, March, April, May, June, that's it. And it's like 33 rupees per day. You're paying them just 33 rupees per day. They're risking their lives. They're going from door to door and, they're campaigning, they're doing door-to-door screening. They're making people aware for vaccines for 33 rupees per day. And that was given only for initial 4 months. After that, nothing, no PPE kits, no sanitizer, even their vaccinations are not done. Jahan tak mujhe yahan ka pata hai, I don't know about rest of the country. And I'm reading reports and so many of them died of COVID. So incentives start with them first, who are coming to, make us aware, make people aware. They're the real frontline workers.
Yeah, true. Very much. Actually, so probably if I may add, I think the corporate world is kind of picking it up to promote their employees getting the vaccinations done. That's going in a big way. The vaccine payments are getting reimbursed and there are holidays being given out, etc. So I think,
We like
into the last population.
all these freebies.
Right. Thank you so much, Tabina, for pitching in. Next one is for Vijayta. Vijayta, this is the other hot topic or probably not a very positive one either. This is about people who are losing jobs. There's a big news in today's front page as well about how many people have lost their jobs and livelihood, especially the daily wage workers, right? So what can be done, right? If you think there's something going on, what can continue, or what should we start doing to address this as a problem?
I'm not an economist, but as a layman, I can say that we need to start putting money in the hands of the people. The government's subsidy schemes, which have done pretty well in the past. Like there's Manreka, but that is only restricted to 100 days job demand, and it depends on your panchayat, your punch. So pretty much everybody has bank accounts these days, and so government has a record of people who require financial assistance. So the government could start by I don't know if how much it will be fiscally possible. As I say, I'm not an economist, but this is what immediately comes to my mind. And the second is with the precautions and with after vaccinating. Vaccination is very important. Various sectors could be open because as we have seen in Delhi, Delhi has unlocked partially, but they have allowed construction work to resume, and but yeah, there should be the pace of vaccination should be just should be double, triple, or maybe 5 times, 6 times. Then only the economy will come on track, because there was a report by CMIE that 23 million people have been pushed into poverty, which is a very, very scary figure. And the government keeps giving us this data that FDI has increased, and so much money is coming into the country. But there is an article in the Hindu. All of you should read if you have time. It explains exactly what are these FDI that the government is claiming. The high FDI that the government is claiming is coming into the country. It's basically money which is going into the stock market. It is not created. These are short-term investments which are beneficial to few people, and they are not adding to jobs and not adding to employment. So these are not long-term solutions. These are only giving benefit to few people who are invested in the stock market. And these are really not creating any asset or any job creation in the real world. So this is the data that government is throwing at us, and showing a rosy picture that everything is fine and everything is hunky-dory, but it is not. The situation is very, very scary on the ground. Being a reporter, my DM is full of messages because people asking for money. There are journalists who have requested for money. Journalists in small town. So that is how precarious the situation is, and we try to help as many people as possible by providing them ration, by providing them other items. But there is as much as you can do, and I don't know. It takes a lot of courage to ask for help from others, but people have been doing that because there is no option.
Right. Sure. That's a great insight regarding the FDI.
I just wanted to add a point to what Vijeta said. When she mentioned about how there are people from, maybe reporters and so on and so forth who are also, in need of money. Recently, I got a message from this person who used to run this chota sa khane ka thela. He used to sell samosa and so on and so forth somewhere in Delhi, and he had gotten in touch with me last year when the lockdown had happened, and he said that the food industry is in such a bad shape because all the restaurants are shut. So is this a subject that you're writing about? Because labor is one of the things that used to cover for the Indian Express. So I said sure. He helped me speak to a lot of people. We did a couple of stories, and about a week ago he got in touch with me again, and he said, there was a cycle of debt that had started in his life because he had to shut down his business. So he had to take loan from people, so he had just finished that cycle of debt because he had just managed to pay off everybody, and he had just started to put together a dukaan again when COVID happened again, lockdown happened again. And this time this is a person, we must remember, this is not somebody who is your definition of poor or urban poor. This is a person who's managed somehow in his life. He's in his early 30s. He's beaten the odds. He's managed to reach a point where he's entered the middle class. It's a huge period of struggle for him. He spent years educating himself. He's managed to do all of that. And now he's at a place where he's asking me that, can you help me out with money? I don't have ration. I don't have things to buy. I have kids in the house and so on and so forth. And, he gave me a caveat. He said, listen, don't give me money. Maybe you don't trust me. Can you get someone to deliver ration at my house? And the thing is, so then of course, we had to get in touch with somebody. We ensure that something reaches him. But a lot of times people sitting in their living rooms, your upper middle class people, a lot of them think, हाँ, गरीबी है तो वो उस रिक्शे वाले के लिए, he is your definition of poor. But that's not the case. People in and around us are now losing jobs. I know Tanushree has just done a story, in fact, yesterday about in the labor areas, in the industrial areas, how many people have lost jobs. And there are, so it's a massive failure on part of the government. Also, when we talk about lockdown, what is a lockdown? A lockdown is nothing unless it's effective lockdown, which means that you're ensuring that there's nobody who's going hungry. There was a video recently on Twitter where in Delhi, and this is a main road in Delhi, we've all crossed it. I think this is that Kashmiri Gate stretch we've all seen. There were, Vijeta must have seen it, I think she shared it also. There were some hundreds of men who were running behind the food van in the middle of the afternoon. I refuse to believe that the government has no idea that this is happening. आपने lockdown किया, it's not your first lockdown, na? You've been doing it since March last year. How are you doing it in a year and a half later and you're not still prepared? कि हाँ इतने भूखे लोग हैं शहर में खिलाने के लिए. Right. Why are there so many requests coming to us? Who are we? We're doing our job. Now our job is to report. Why are people requesting us? That's an additional thing. And we just have to help each other out. But at the end of the day, while we help each other out and while we praise that Twitter is this great place where people have come together and they've managed to help each other, it also shows that the governments have failed because everything is happening on social media,
Yes.
True. Yeah, absolutely. So that's a bigger problem to tackle as well. And I think it's only growing by the day as we speak. Let's hope there is no third wave and we don't get stuck in the same loop once again, right? So the next question is to you. Again, the other big elephant in the room is regarding the limited resources that we have, especially with the talks of the future wave that is coming in terms of the doctors and nurses and the beds, right? Even if policies change, even if the interests change, even if awareness happens, there's only so much we are dealing with. So in your opinion, some solutions are being proposed by various people as well. So in your opinion, what should we be doing to ensure that the resources are adequate for future challenges that come in?
Right. So, I'd been speaking to a lot of healthcare workers about one, of course, how things have been inside hospitals, ICUs, etc. But one of the questions I would always also ask them was, when the third wave comes, what are the things that should not be repeated in the third wave? How do we tackle those problems already in advance? What would you want to see change within your hospitals and your systems, so that there's no repeat of this, right? Like resources are managed, so on and so forth. So they made a couple of points and I made notes of those. One was that, of course, the first thing everybody said, vaccinate. You want to reduce the burden on hospitals. The only and the most short way is to vaccinate your population. You have to do it at a far faster speed, as mentioned. Second thing that they said was that as far as, for instance, in government hospitals, there are hospitals in Delhi like LNJP, the Lok Nayak Hospital, which has been a COVID, it's 100% a COVID hospital, which means every healthcare worker who's working there is also working on COVID for a span of 6 to 8 months, which is what a lot of healthcare workers in the government and the private sector I spoke to had a problem with. They said that it should be equally distributed among hospitals because the cycle that they told me was that 1 week you work in a COVID ward, then you had a 4-day break to recuperate, whatever. Then for a week you work in a non-COVID ward, of course, because by then we have to remember our healthcare workers are also vaccinated. So they can move to a non-COVID ward. Then you take a break for a few days and then you return and then you start your duty in the COVID ward. Right. So basically how nurses, your nursing orderlies, your doctors also need that break. You can't have them working just in COVID centers throughout. One was that. Second thing they spoke about was, so for instance, I had spoken to a senior nursing officer at RML Hospital, another government hospital. She mentioned that there are 1,200 nursing officers at RML Hospital, of which 400 are contractual workers, right? at present, at any given day, there are only about 600 to 700 who are working, because either they have COVID, either members of your staff have COVID, or there are nursing officers who are women who are pregnant, or they are lactating, or there are nursing officers who are senior citizens, slightly older in age, and they have other comorbidities, BP, asthma, whatever that kind of holds them back from being at work. So they said that, in that case, you have to figure out how you're also hiring. So for instance, what Manipal Hospital in Delhi did recently was they got their nurses in Manipal Hospital down south. They got them transferred, 20 of them transferred to the Delhi hospital. I read that in the Hindu only. And, so what happens is that the load on the hospital is slightly reduced because you have people coming from outside. So one of the suggestions that the healthcare workers have given me was that if a particular city is going through a massive wave, there has to be provision where you incentivize it to a point that nursing officers from outside, from cities that are not facing a crunch, are willing to come and work in your cities. It's a wave, how it works with oxygen. Like Kejriwal said that, "Acha, hamara oxygen abhi ho gaya, ab ye baki states mein de do." It also has to work in that similar manner for healthcare workers. Another thing, again, I keep talking about it, but mental health, it's also a huge pandemic in itself. These doctors and nursing officers have gone through a traumatizing time. We've seen 30-year-olds die. We've seen their own relatives die, and they've reported to work in 4 days, which a lot of times we report as tales of heroism or tales of like, dekho inme kitna resilience hai. It's not resilience. They're just trying to save their jobs. So you have to also ensure that your healthcare workers, their mental health is also taken care of. Another thing, recently, I think sometime end of May, the Indian Professional Nurses Association wrote a letter to Dr. Harshvardhan, our health minister, about hiring. And they said that how there are 12,500 nurses who've passed the NORCET, the exam for permanent jobs that you get at AIIMS hospitals across the country. They've only hired 4,200 so far. There are 8,000 nurses that are in waiting. What hospitals end up doing is they start getting contractual nurses, right? Because contractual nurse ko aap 28,000 rupees de rahe ho government hospital mein. While if you have a permanent nursing officer, you have to pay them upwards of 70,000. So, your hiring process, all of this has to change. And just because COVID second wave in a city like Delhi has ended, or in a city like Bangalore is on its way out and Bombay mein khatam ho gaya, doesn't mean that your efforts at trying to boost the health infrastructure stops. कि अब हम third wave का इंतजार करेंगे जी, जब third wave comes, then we'll again start our work. No, you have to keep at it. So, there has to be that consistent work that governments have to put in, and it's entirely on them. It's not on healthcare workers. This time in the second wave, we saw owners of hospitals. My father's a healthcare worker. There were his colleagues who were going and standing outside the oxygen plants with cylinders. Is this what you have trained your nursing officers and your orderlies for? No, not at all. This is not their job. So, the government really has a very, very difficult task ahead if they want to, do better in the third wave. And there will be a third wave. I don't think there's any point denying that. That's just how pandemics work.
Sure. Thanks, Soumya. That's a very good insight as well. So while everybody is focusing on where do we get the doctors from, moving people who are in their internships or in their final years to start working, what you mentioned is very interesting as well. We need to make better utilization of doctors and nurses who are already there. Also, the processes have to change, right? Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much. Thanks for that. So we are done with this round of the questions. Venuka, I just invite my colleague Venuka to take over.
Yes. So thank you, Hari. Now we are actually running. We have to run a little faster now. So thank you so much. You've been very generous with your comments. In this next section, let's add some more soul to our conversation. Now, COVID has been such an emotional time for everybody. And for you guys, you've seen different kind of challenges we can't even imagine. So it would not be definitely would not be an overstatement to say that your profession is the one who's rooted into the heartland. So in 30 seconds, quick 30 seconds, share a happy or positive memory that displays India's resilience to fight COVID. Something that would be forever etched into your hearts. So let's begin with Tanushree.
Benuka, I'm so sorry to be a spoil sport, but I have been on field for all these past months, and I have absolutely no happy memory of whatever's going in our country today. But yes, very quickly adding to that, that as you know, Soumya was talking about mental health. So something which adds to my strength when I am on field, I am watching people who doesn't have they don't have food, 2 square meals to eat, they don't have any money, but somehow or the other they know that okay, we are struggling to make our ends meet, but we cannot die, so we just helping each other. Obviously there it's a extremely dark times we are going through, and if somebody is going through something, we just can't go and tell that person that अरे तुम्हें क्या हो गया है, क्या हो गया, तो उसको तो देखो उसके घर में कोई मर गया है, वो देखिए आर्मी में क्या चल रहा है, वो जवान खड़े हैं. So I think this doesn't make any sense. This is bullshit. People are going through their own kind of traumas, everything. But I think the resilience, when you go to rural part, when you see people are surviving it's extremely unfortunate that they have to go through that. There is nothing called, it's government and the system right now, is taking their resilience as their weakness. Ki acha ye log to immune ho gaye hain. That shouldn't be, that is not right. That shouldn't be the way. But the kind of, somehow trying to be happy, somehow trying to keep that hope that, okay, there will be better times. We will survive through this. We are in this together somehow. So I think that sort of gives me strength. And I think that I would really love to pass on to others that, okay, we will, even if I'm going through like absolute shit, somebody would call me that, oh, I won't add up to that. I will just say, okay, no, we are in this together. Don't worry. I also have no money. I also have no house. I am with you. We'll get through this together. We'll survive this. So I think that is something I think important. There are no happy memories. I'm so sorry, but nothing, absolutely nothing.
So I'll summarize it as commune, resilience, and sharing in the times of scarcity.
Yes.
Yeah. Let's be hopeful for that. So Safina, can you please add on next?
Okay, so there are, I wouldn't say resilience. I would rather say that struggling to save a life. I remember when I did one story from UP, it was about a dialysis patient who had got COVID, and they were not getting a bed anywhere because there was no facility available in and around which was a hospital, a COVID hospital, and where the dialysis could also be done. So they were not getting the patient admitted, and in getting the patient admitted, all of the family members got COVID. And we thought that we will highlight the story and we would figure out something. We were already getting in touch with the officials and the DM of DM there, but nothing was actually happening. So when we did a story and we were till the time we were just crowdfund actually manage COVID at home, but her COVID was getting severe day by day. So finally, one of my colleagues and friend who was accompanying me, Saurabh, we managed to get her, relieved from the hospital free of COVID, and we crowdsourced a lot of money for him because they required additional medicines for him post-COVID, to deal with all the complications. And we were I remember one more thing. I saw a tweet of a man and whose wife was 9 months pregnant, and they tested 4 times, and all the times the reports came negative for the COVID. And she was struggling to get admitted because she didn't have a COVID positive certificate, and there was no place to get her admitted. But her saturation was falling down even till 72, 75 in between. We tried to speak to the officials, but we got her admitted to the hospital finally, after putting in a lot of hard work and effort, which is also one more important thing that we need to understand, that if a person is not getting a positive certificate and is having more and more complications, I do not understand why is there no mechanism available there.
Absolutely. Safina, there's
those people
issue,
and we treat them as COVID patients, because if they are showing the same symptoms, if they are showing some. Am I audible?
No, Safina, your video and voice is breaking.
Am I audible?
No, you're not. I mean, you're there, but you're cracking up. So
you can get back to her at the last. You can go ahead.
Yeah.
I'll stop my video?
Yeah. So, Safina, as we hear, I think you very well put about the scarcity part and also people helping each other out during their complications. So, thank you so much for that. So, Dr. Tabina, can we move on to you?
Yeah, so very quickly, actually, you said two good memories or takeaways, and this is what you want
Yes,
from this whole
absolutely.
episode of. See, it's been a lot of, it's been glooms, there's been sadness around. We have felt helpless as journalists, as people, as humans, because people were reaching out to us for help on social media. Otherwise, also our sources, villages, but we were not in a position to really help so many, but we were to some extent. So two good memories as an influencer, I was able to make a little difference. There was this patient from Rajsamand in Rajasthan, and I received a call from a volunteer friend of mine, a lawyer, at 12 in the night, and he told me that, ma'am, there is a patient at Rajsamand, और उनका SOP level 35 हो गया है, and he needs an ICU, he needs a ventilator. That was midnight, 35 पे. So I called the doctor there, and he told me कि कहीं भी खाली नहीं है यहाँ hospital में, so we have to take him to Udaipur. Udaipur is the nearest, if who are well aware with Rajasthan, Udaipur is very close to Rajsamand. So family se baat hua, they were like, we don't think he will survive because 35 is too low. And वो ऐसा कहने लगे कि मैम अब तो हम क्रीमेटोरियम ढूंढ रहे हैं जहां हम अपने फादर को लेंगे क्योंकि वो बचना मुश्किल है. इवन डॉक्टर सेड कि मैडम क्यों इस पे टाइम वेस्ट हम रात को करें, ये तो 35 है ऑलरेडी, हम किसको हटाए वेंटिलेटर से, किसको रखे, है ना. डॉक्टर्स हैड गिवन अप, फैमिली हैड गिवन अप, but somehow I couldn't sleep. I spoke to my sources at CMO people, and they really helped, and we managed a hospital bed in Udaipur, and we convinced them कि आप इनको एक बार लेके चलो, है ना, बहुत मुश्किल है पर लेके चलिए, 2 घंटे का सफर है, 1.5 घंटे का. He was 35. I couldn't sleep that night. That oxygen level was 35. I was really, I had given up. मुझे कुछ समझ नहीं आ रहा था, but really wanted to help. In the morning, we found that his oxygen level was 95. His vitals were fine. So then I called them back and I told them, like, what did you tell me last night that he won't survive? So no matter what your vital status are, no matter if you are destined to live, you will live. So that was my takeaway from this entire thing. And one more takeaway as a journalist: never forget, underprivileged people. Never forget them. Vaccination unke liye abhi bhi ख्वाब hai. We have nomads here. We have, tribal people in Rajasthan. We have Pakistani Hindu migrants living here and have been really chasing up their case now. I mean, I did many stories and finally court took cognizance and allowed that they should be given a jab even if they don't have an Aadhaar card. So, I mean, oxygen part sab ho gaya hai. Now, our job as a journalist is to take up this issue. Like, kahan vaccination nahi ho raha hai. Treat everybody equal, human. वो कहाँ जाएंगे अभी? Where will these refugees go? They can't go back to their countries. They're persecuted there. It's our job to save their lives. So I think these are two takeaways, two positive things that, I can really recollect in these 2 stressful months. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Anusha, can you go next, please? And again, remind all the panelists to please keep it short and sweet.
Very quickly, around the same time, I think last year, there was this huge exodus of migrants from Karnataka back to their hometowns. Palace Grounds, a really huge open space in the heart of Bangalore city. Was outside Palace Ground gate, you could see migrants waiting to collect their train tickets, standing in queues that were running by the kilometers. And here I was reporting their plight, bag and baggage, children on their shoulders, on their, on their heads, fully ready to go back to their hometowns. But most of them had to return disappointed because there were no tickets available. There were no trains running, except a few very limited number of trains running. And there I saw dozens of students, youngsters, 19, 18, 20-year-old students coming there with kits, giving them water, giving them food. And honestly, it kind of warmed my heart to see young people. When I saw that, I knew that they're the future of the country. And if they are the future of the country, then It's good. The Bangalore student community came together to help these migrants in the midst of a pandemic, fully realizing that they were putting themselves at risk as well. They did not pay a lot of attention to it. They only wanted to help the migrants. And for me, that's a mark of resilience in our country, that we are ready to help each other out no matter what the circumstances.
Absolutely.
So I will not take too much of your time then. That's it.
Very well said. Thank you so much. Vijeta.
Yeah, I just I recall one incident. One of my young colleagues, Nikhil, he had gone to this ITBP's COVID center at Chhatarpur in South Delhi, which had just opened the morning, and there was like patients had flooded the entrance to the COVID center, and at that time there were no oxygen beds in Delhi. So that was the only place that was providing oxygen beds, and the people had no clue how to get admitted. The government had said a day ago that no walk-ins will be allowed. But when your patient is dying, when your mother, when your father, when you see them dying, you don't wait for these formalities. Just rush to the hospital. So he saw this young girl from West Bengal sitting on the footpath with her mother, and the mother was gasping for breath. Then he called me and he asked if something could be done. And we just used our contacts and through we put in all the efforts, and finally that patient got a bed. And just few days ago, I got a message, got a call from the girl that the mother has recovered and is healthy and fine, and they're back home. This is like one of the positive takeaways.
Thank you so much. This is really lovely. So Soumya, please, 30 seconds quickly.
So, I can't remember a particular incident, but I think in the last 2.5 months, just seeing people, running SOS calls, even just sometimes, you'd start in the morning and you'd put out an SOS call, and it would take like 8 hours, 9 hours to help out that person. But by the end of it, you knew that help had reached that person, and it would be through this collective effort, connecting with people you had never spoken to in the past, maybe you don't know them, they're all strangers. And if you can still manage to help somebody, and sometimes in Bombay, sometimes in Delhi, I think just that itself was it just used to make me feel good and bad at the same time. Good because like chalo kisi ka help ho gaya, bad because it'll be like arey pure din mein only one person I managed to help, one family. It took me 9 hours to get one oxygen cylinder from Gurgaon to Delhi, and then from Delhi it had to be taken to Greater Noida for this gentleman whose son and daughter were not here. But just that one person, so I think we had a lot of those days, and you had strangers helping out each other, people just sending their phone numbers on Twitter like it just didn't matter. There was this sense of community which a lot of us hadn't felt in a really long time. I think for me that was the main thing. And of course, like sometimes when your stories have some kind of impact, for a day and a half, you feel very good about it. I did a story on something, and I'd done a story last year on on a very sad story where a nursing officer had died of COVID, the first nursing officer who had died in Delhi of COVID, Ambika PK, at a private hospital in Delhi. And all other nursing officers from the hospital had told me off record that they were being made to reuse PPE. And this was, a story I really went after, and we did a lot of follow-ups, and then the hospital did have to shift and they did have to bring out new PPEs. So, just those things, like you feel a little bit like, chalo, theek hai, kuch kiya hai. But otherwise, I think it's just a collective effort. I think what we do, but just that collective effort, I think was great.
Thank you so much for being so modest and honest at the same time, all of you. Like it said, it's a great honor to save a life. You saved many. So thank you so much for all the contributions that you've made. I'll just hand it over to Swati now to conclude today's proceedings.
Thank you, Venuka. And like we were talking about, good things that has happened or some ray of hope that has come up. I think we as COVID Jankari has seen volunteers like Sumiran and Apurva. They're on this Zoom channel also, who are working relentlessly 24/7 on SOS calls. So we ourselves have experienced how, students and volunteers and people in their job has come out on these platforms, on WhatsApp groups, on social media, and helped each other. It's like day and night they are picking up, any emergency of an unknown individual
and working day and night to find out the solution for these people. That is how I also met Tabina, because we were working on different leads to get different kind of resources. And it's astonishingly surprising that people have that will to actually help people they don't even know. So it was like a miracle that was happening, though there was lack of resources, there was ambiguity, there was no information, there was unstructured formats of information that was coming up, but people were structuring in their Google Sheets and giving information and putting on leads. Hats off to all the people who have done all that work. And thanks everyone for an eye-opening discussion, bringing out the harsh truths as well as the signs of hope as we venture ahead in the battle against this pandemic. And I'd like to conclude today's talk with this quote: journalism can never be silent. That is its greatest virtue and greatest fault. It must speak, and speak immediately, while the echoes of wonder, the claims of triumph, and the signs of horror are still in the air. I salute the vigor and leadership exemplified by our panel today and wish them very best as they continue to highlight the ground realities for us. Stay safe and stay healthy.